Okay. So, who are you?
My name is Tatyana Moaton. I am a mother, I'm a missionary, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, but above all that, I'm a Black woman. I'm a Black woman, the true embodiment of all of that. That's who I am.
Thank you, thank you. And what is mental health to you?
Ooh, mental health. It's an interesting quandary for me, particularly since I have been classically trained. I have a bachelor's in developmental psychology. When we talk about mental health, um, it can evoke emotions of both stigma, but also the reality that in some kind of way we all suffer, um, sometimes in silence, but and sometimes out loud. But there are different ways to define what mental health means. And so for me, like I said, it evokes real and raw feelings, particularly since I was in places where I needed help and didn't know how to ask, and also dealt with issues that manifested in ways that I didn't realize. And so when I think about mental health, like I said, it brings emotions for me.
Thank you. And what was it like discussing mental health or depression growing up?
There was no discussion. Albeit growing up south side of Chicago, grandmother raised from Mississippi. What goes on in this house is never to be talked about outside of this house. And so being conditioned in that way to not ask for help, not to discuss issues when you have them. And so, like I said, they just weren't talked about at all. And it was also seen as a just kind of like a weakness to have those things, and just dealing with so many issues of everyday life. You don't have time to stop and think about, depression. And I can recall very vividly dealing with issues, particularly surrounding like discovering my gender identity and wrestling with that. And one of my aunts saying, you need to come up out of that fetal stage. And I never understood what that meant until I got older and was at college and got to kind of deal with, talk about and understand what it means to repress things and, to kind of compartmentalize stuff. And I was just like making that juxtaposition from that time to a point where it's like, okay, now I know these things. But as we know, like with conditioning, it's hard to undo a lot of that stuff. And so for years, it wasn't something I even focused on. I just continued to move forward. Being in the military where you were taught to suck it up and drive on, and it's just like you don't have a second to do those things. But life happens. And so then you get into those moments where you're forced to face those things. And so it was quite challenging, like I said, and just recently being okay with talking about, hey, I'm depressed. Going on Facebook Live and very vocally talk to people about those things, because the thing that I recognized a long time ago is the life that I live isn't necessarily my own. And so there are people who look up to me in a way that I don't even realize. And so I live my life very transparently. And so when I was dealing with in a very, very dark place, I was vocal about it, because I wanted people to know that this is what it's not always pretty. And not everything in life is going to be easy. But the fact of the matter that I'm human, I hurt, but it's not for me to give up, and that was the most important part of that message for me when I started talking about it, was that we're going to get through this together.
Thank you. You already spoke about being in dark places. Could you tell us a little bit more about the depression that you faced?
Yeah, for me, just like for the past 2-3 years, if I'm being honest, I have been dealing with kind of like I don't want to say it's not manic, but it borders on where it's like this repetitive cycle and never having a sense of fulfillment, like making major accomplishments in my personal and professional life, but having that loneliness, not having a partner, losing 2 children in 1 year. And so it was a lot. It was a lot, and I never understood why it was that I never wanted to socialize. It would be literally go to work, come home, And so being in that place for me, I think it kind of reached its apex when I went through a breakup recently. And yeah, it just brought everything together at once. And it got to a place where it was like, I can't handle this. And as much as people try to, put it in your head, you're stronger than you know, and you weren't built to break. All of that sounds nice, but when you are in the moment, there is this darkness. And having been there from I lost an aunt in the early 2000s, and so for me, it was just like I knew what that dark hole looks like, and it was like something that I never wanted to go to, but it was like unconsciously I had already been there. And so the moments that I would have where I would be okay, those are moments that I was peeking out as opposed to looking in to that dark hole. And so it was just recognizing that, but it was difficult for me personally, in as much as that I've never been that depressed before, to the point of literally I can vividly recall sitting on the side of my bed on a Saturday with a straight razor and contemplating suicide. And not in a way that people would think like, wait a minute, Tati, what's going on? Don't hurt yourself. But it's just like the fact that you get to a point where you're just tired. And that's hard. Because people, you can just say, okay, I can't deal with this. And not that taking my life would make things easier, but it would take away the pain. And that's the mindset, not to say that that's fact, that's the mindset that I had at that time. And so, but just coming back to the realization that this is a moment, it is not a lifetime, and there is another side to that. But then also opening up my mouth and reaching out to people, asking for referrals for mental health providers, and talking to mental health providers and working through those things and getting to the root of those things, because it wasn't just situational. This isn't just about the breakup. This is a compounding of other things, and childhood traumas and gender identity and issues in the workplace. And so it all just came together like this meeting of just chaos all at once. And essentially I found myself in a place that was like, how do I get out of here? And I knew that the only way that I would be through some intervention and putting myself first and choosing to say, you know what, I'm gonna live. And I choose me. I choose me.
I can't tell you how many times I said to people, I don't know how to explain this. It's a hole that I can no longer dig out of. And in order for me to begin my process of healing, I had to choose me. I had to block out everything that I wanted to accomplish, all the things that people said that, this is what I need to get to where I needed to get to. I couldn't get to any place until I was able to start my own healing. And so thank you for being raw and honest.
Sure.
And it's rare that people can be both sometimes, because you can be raw.
Yeah.
But if you're not honest with yourself, then you can't tell the full story, if that makes sense. When did you first realize you had depression?
I would honestly say as early as I can recall would probably be maybe 7 years old, coming home from kindergarten and having a teacher tell me, you're not a girl. And dealing with that could probably be the earliest that I can recall that I actually had experienced what depression was. And of course, not being able to tell, identify it in those terms, saying that I'm sad, but when the sadness lasts past a day, okay, this is what this is, and that's the reality of it. And so that's probably my earliest recollection as a child. As an adult, I would honestly say throughout my early 20s, I was probably depressed. And that just came from, coming into the discovery of who I am and trying to reconcile my gender identity with my spirituality, with being in the military. And it was a lot. But it's one of those things where I continue to function to a point, because we all oftentimes think so, like people, particularly around substance abuse issues and stuff, we're saying a functioning addict, and I was a functioning depressive person. I knew how to put on a smile and make everybody think it's okay, and never telling people that I'm one click away from going home and blowing my brains out. And so, yeah, those are some of my earliest recollections.
Thank you. Now that you have given yourself an intervention, how do you cope with the moods, with the depression and the blues, and keep yourself moving?
The way that I kind of have learned to deal with them is being honest about them. Having that accountability partner that I can call and check in with, hey, I'm not having a good day. Having a provider that I can call and, schedule an appointment with and say, let's work through some of these things. But then also relying on some of those through therapy, some of the coping mechanisms. But I think the most essential thing for me in dealing with my depression is just being honest and no longer hiding from them. Because like I said, had been so conditioned to a point where it's like, we don't talk about that. And that's not okay. And you come from a people who are strong, but they never had that space to say, I'm not okay. And so in choosing me, I am making an honest choice to say, I'm not okay, and that's okay. And so for me, like I said, that has been empowering, because for the first time, I can honestly say, I'm choosing me. Everybody else's problems and issues, I can get to those, but I have to put me first.
And so, if there was one thing you could share with everyone around mental health, what would it be?
Sorry. If there was one thing that I could share with someone surrounding mental health, is that, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you.
If I had to share one thing surrounding mental health with someone, I would say that it is not a color or race thing. It is a human thing to have feelings and emotions and not understand how to deal with those. But there is help. There are people, there are systems, to reach out to, and that you're not alone. You're not alone. You're not the only person dealing with depression or anxiety or other things. And there's a beauty out of that. There's another side. And it's hard when you're in the moment to see those things, but coming out of those things, there's
blossoming.
Yeah, there's like this beautiful, like you said, blossoming of, the petals rolling back and you being able to just stretch out and feel the sun, and that feels good. That feels good. So like I said, if there's one thing that I would share, is that you're not alone, and it's okay to not be okay, but understanding that there's another side to that.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing your truth, and choosing you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tati.
Productions.